The shotgun blast that killed Violet Zimmerman's father echoed through the valley 3 months ago. And now her no-good brother Tommy stood in their dusty yard with empty hands and emptier promises, while their only milk cow disappeared down the rutted road toward town. She watched from the doorway of their weather-beaten cabin, her calico dress hanging loose on a frame that had grown thinner with each passing week. Her dark blonde hair pulled back in a braid that needed washing, and felt something inside her chest crack open like drought-parched earth. Tommy would not meet her eyes as he shuffled past, reeking of whiskey and shame, muttering something about a sure thing and loaded dice that turned out neither sure nor fair. "You worthless fool," Violet said, her voice steady despite the trembling in her hands. "That cow was all we had left. Daisy gave us milk, butter, cheese. How are we supposed to eat now? How am I supposed to make it through the winter?" Tommy finally looked at her, his face flushed and sweating in the late August heat of 1883. At 23, he should have been the man of the family after their father's death, should have taken responsibility for their small homestead just outside Tahlequah, Oklahoma, in the Cherokee Nation territory. Instead, he had spent the past months drinking away what little money they had and avoiding the hard work that their 40 acres demanded. "I thought I could win us something better," Tommy said, his words slurring slightly. "Double our livestock, maybe get some cash money to hire help for the harvest. That gambler in town, he said the game was friendly, said a man could make his fortune if he played smart." "And you believed him?" Violet stepped off the porch, her worn boots kicking up dust. "Tommy, you have never played smart a day in your entire life. That cow was not yours to gamble. She was mine. Papa left her to me specifically because he knew I would take care of her, because he knew I would use her to keep us fed. Well, she is gone now." Tommy straightened his shoulders, trying for defiance but achieving only petulance. "What is done. I will figure something out. Get off this property." The words came out harder than Violet intended, but she did not take them back. "I mean it, Tommy. You have taken everything from me. You drank away the money Papa saved. You sold his tools for a fraction of what they were worth. You let the crops wither because you could not be bothered to tend them, and now you have gambled away my cow. I want you gone." Tommy's face went red, then pale. "Violet, you cannot mean that." "Where am I supposed to go? I do not care." She crossed her arms over her chest. "You have made it clear that you care nothing for this family or this land. So go find whatever life you think is waiting for you out there, but you will not do it here, not anymore." For a moment, she thought he might argue, might even apologize and beg for another chance. Instead, he simply turned and walked away, heading down the same road the gambler had taken with Daisy. Violet watched until he disappeared around the bend, then sank down on the porch steps and let herself cry for the first time since her father's funeral. The afternoon sun beat down mercilessly, and the cicadas sang their endless song in the blackjack oaks that dotted the property. Their small cabin needed repairs that would not get done now. The vegetable garden was struggling despite her best efforts to haul water from the creek. She had perhaps 2 months of supplies in the root cellar, and then what? A woman alone could not work a homestead, not realistically. She had no husband, no prospects, and at 21 years old she was already being whispered about in town as a spinster in waiting. Violet wiped her eyes and stood up. Self-pity would not feed her or fix her problems. She needed to think, needed to plan. Perhaps she could find work in Tahlequah, though jobs for women were scarce and poorly paid. Perhaps one of the neighboring families would need help with the harvest and could pay her in food. Perhaps she could sell the land itself, though the thought of giving up the place her parents had built made her stomach turn. She was still standing there, trying to sort through impossible options, when she heard hoofbeats coming up the road. Her first thought was that Tommy had returned, but the horse sounded too strong, too well kept. She shaded her eyes against the sun and saw a rider approaching, leading 2 cows behind him on ropes. No, 3 cows. One of them was unmistakably Daisy, with her distinctive white patch on her brown flank. The rider drew closer, and Violet saw he was a man in his mid-20s, tall and lean in the saddle, wearing a dark hat pulled low against the sun. His clothes were dusty from the road but well made. His horse, a beautiful sorrel gelding that looked like it could run all day. He rode with the easy confidence of someone who had spent most of his life on horseback, and when he finally looked up at her from beneath the brim of his hat, his eyes were the color of creek water in summer, green, brown, and clear. "Miss Zimmerman." His voice was deep and measured, with a hint of Texas drawl softened by years of wandering. "I am looking for Miss Violet Zimmerman. That is me." She came down off the porch, her heart suddenly pounding. "Is that my cow you have there? If you are Violet Zimmerman, then yes, this is your cow." He dismounted smoothly and removed his hat, revealing dark brown hair that needed cutting and a face that was more interesting than handsome, all strong bones and sun-weathered skin. "Name is Nathan Brooks. I was playing cards in town this afternoon when your brother brought this cow to the table as his stake. He lost her to a gambler named Carlyle, and I won her from Carlyle about 3 hands later." Violet stared at him, then at Daisy, then back at him. "And you brought her back. Why would you do that?" Nathan Brooks shifted his weight, looking uncomfortable for the first time. "I asked around about the situation before I left town. Folks told me about your father passing, about your brother's drinking, about you trying to hold things together on your own out here. It did not seem right to keep a woman's only milk cow just because I had a good hand of cards, so I figured I would bring her back where she belongs." "I do not have money to pay you for her," Violet said, hating the words even as she spoke them. "I barely have money for anything right now." "I am not asking for money." Nathan gestured to the other 2 cows, both younger and healthier looking than Daisy. "These 2 are mine, bought and paid for with my winnings today. I was going to start my own herd, build up to something respectable. But it occurs to me that you need them more than I do right now, and I can always win more in the next town." Violet felt her throat tighten. "I do not understand. You are giving me 3 cows, just like that." "I am giving you back your 1 cow and lending you 2 more, Nathan corrected. "I will come by in a few days to check on them, make sure they are settling in all right. After that, well, we can talk about terms." "What kind of terms?" Violet asked suspiciously. She had learned the hard way that nothing came free, especially not from strange men. Nathan put his hat back on, the shadow hiding his expression. "The kind where you keep the cows healthy and I get to visit now and then to make sure my investment is sound. Maybe you could spare a cup of coffee when I visit. Maybe we could talk like civilized people. That is all I am asking for right now." He handed her the ropes and started to mount his horse. Violet found herself speaking before she could think better of it. "Wait. At least let me feed you supper before you ride out. It is the least I can do, and it will be dark soon. You can bed down in the barn if you need a place to stay tonight." Nathan paused with 1 foot in the stirrup, then settled back on the ground. "That is kind of you, Miss Zimmerman. I accept." They led the cows to the small barn, which was really more of a lean-to attached to a fenced paddock. Nathan moved with practiced efficiency, checking the animals over, making sure they had water and access to what little hay Violet had stored. He did not talk much while he worked, but his hands were gentle with the cows, and he noticed things she had missed, like a small cut on Daisy's flank that needed cleaning. "That probably happened during the walk to town," Violet said, watching him clean the wound with water from the trough. She is not used to being led on a rope. She usually just follows me around like a dog. She is a good cow, Nathan said. Patient temperament. The other two are younger, maybe 3 years old each. They will both be ready to breed next spring if you can find a bull to service them. Or I could bring one by when the time comes. You seem to know a lot about cattle. Grew up on a ranch in West Texas, Nathan said, straightening up. Worked cattle drives for a few years after I left home. Been trying to save up enough to start my own place, but the money never seems to stick around long enough. He smiled slightly. Cards are good to me sometimes, but they are a hard way to build a fortune. They walked back to the cabin together, an awkward silence falling between them. Violet was intensely aware that she was alone with a strange man, that her nearest neighbor was half a mile away, that she had no way to defend herself if Nathan Brooks turned out to be less honorable than he appeared. But something in the way he had handled the cows, the way he had spoken about her situation without judgment or pity, made her want to trust him. Inside the cabin, she built up the fire in the stove and started pulling together what she could for a meal. It was not much. Beans she had been soaking since morning, a few strips of salt pork, cornbread she had made that morning. She felt embarrassed by the meagerness of it, but Nathan did not seem to notice or care. He sat at her small table and watched her work, his hat on his knee, his hands folded. "Your brother went south on foot," Nathan said after a while. "I passed him on the road about 2 miles back. He did not look happy." "He has not been happy since Papa died," Violet said, stirring the beans. "Or maybe he was never happy and I just did not notice because Papa kept him in line. Either way, he is gone now and I am better off for it. It is hard losing family." Nathan's voice was soft. "Even when they are not much good to you. Do you have family?" "Not anymore. My mother died when I was young. My father remarried a woman who did not want stepchildren around. I left when I was 16 and have been on my own ever since." He paused. "That was 9 years ago and I have not been back to check if he is still alive. Does that make me a bad son?" Violet turned to look at him. "It makes you a survivor. Sometimes that is all we can be." They ate in companionable silence, the meal simple but filling. Nathan complimented her cornbread, and she found herself smiling genuinely for the first time in weeks. After they finished, he insisted on helping her clean up, which flustered her because she had never known a man to voluntarily wash dishes. They worked side by side at the basin, and she was aware of how tall he was, how his shoulder nearly brushed hers in the small space. "I should let you rest," Nathan said when the last dish was dried and put away. "I will be fine in the barn." "There is a blanket out there and some old quilts," Violet said. "It gets cold at night, even in August. Help yourself to whatever you need." He nodded and collected his hat. At the door, he paused and looked back at her. "Miss Zimmerman, I meant what I said. I am not looking for anything from you except maybe some conversation now and then. I know how it looks, a strange man riding up with gifts. But I give you my word as a gentleman such as I am, that my intentions are honorable." "I believe you," Violet said, and was surprised to find she meant it. "Thank you, Mr. Brooks, for everything." That night, she lay in her narrow bed and listened to the sounds of the cows settling in the barn, the soft nicker of Nathan's horse, the distant call of an owl. For the first time since her father died, she felt something like hope stirring in her chest. It was fragile and uncertain, but it was there. The next morning, she woke before dawn and went out to milk Daisy, only to find that Nathan was already up, had already done the milking, and was in the process of repairing a broken fence rail. He had his shirt sleeves rolled up, his hat pushed back, and he worked with the focused attention of someone who knew his way around manual labor. "You did not have to do that," Violet called out, carrying the bucket of fresh milk he had set aside. "I know," Nathan said, hammering in a nail. "But I was up anyway, and the work needed doing." She made them breakfast, frying eggs from her diminishing store and heating up leftover cornbread. They ate on the porch, watching the sun come up over the hills, painting everything gold and amber. It felt strangely domestic, strangely right, and that scared her almost as much as it pleased her. "I should get moving," Nathan said eventually. "I have a game lined up in Fort Smith this weekend, and it is a 2-day ride from here. Will you come back?" The question slipped out before Violet could stop it, and she felt her face heat with embarrassment. Nathan looked at her, and something in his expression softened. "I will come back. I told you, I need to check on my investment. Give me 2 weeks, maybe 3 depending on how the cards fall. I will bring supplies when I come, whatever you need most. You make a list and I will do my best to fill it. I can pay you back," Violet said. "Eventually, when I get on my feet." "We will figure something out," Nathan said. He stood and settled his hat on his head. "Take care of yourself, Miss Zimmerman, and take care of those cows." "Violet," she said impulsively. "You can call me Violet." He smiled, and it transformed his whole face, making him look younger and less careworn. "Then you should call me Nathan." Miss Zimmerman and Mr. Brooks are too formal for folks who have shared a breakfast. She watched him ride away, his horse moving at an easy lope, and stood there long after he disappeared from view. Then she turned back to the cabin, to the work that never ended, but somehow it felt less overwhelming than it had the day before. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of hard work. Violet tended the cows, worked in her garden, tried to salvage what she could of the crops her brother had neglected. The 3 cows produced enough milk that she was able to make butter and soft cheese, and she took some into Tahlequah to sell at the general store. The money was not much, but it was something, and the storekeeper's wife complimented her cheese and said she would buy more if Violet could produce it regularly. In town, she heard gossip about her brother. Tommy had tried to get credit at the saloon and been refused. He had picked a fight with a Cherokee farmer and gotten himself thrown in jail for the night. He had been seen heading west, following the trail toward Fort Gibson. Violet listened to these reports with a mixture of relief and sadness. She hoped he would find whatever he was looking for, but she did not want him to find it anywhere near her. She also heard gossip about Nathan Brooks, the gambler who had won big in town and then given away his winnings to a desperate woman. Some folks thought he was a fool. Others thought he had ulterior motives. A few, the ones who knew Violet and her situation, thought he might be a decent man doing a decent thing. Violet did not care what they thought. She only cared that he had kept his word so far, and she found herself watching the road more often than she wanted to admit. He returned on a Thursday afternoon, 3 weeks after he had left. Violet was in the garden, pulling weeds in the oppressive heat, when she heard hoofbeats and looked up to see him riding in with a pack horse loaded with supplies. Her heart did something complicated in her chest, and she had to wipe her dusty hands on her apron to hide their sudden trembling. "You came back," she said, stating the obvious. "I said I would." Nathan dismounted and started unloading the pack horse. "I brought flour, sugar, coffee, salt, some dried beef, and a few other things I thought you might need. Also, I found a good price on laying hens in Fort Smith, but I did not think I could manage them on the ride back. If you want them, I can bring them next time." "Nathan, this is too much." Violet stared at the supplies, mentally calculating their cost. "I cannot possibly repay you for all this." "Then do not think of it as a debt," Nathan said. He carried a sack of flour into the cabin like it weighed nothing. "Think of it as an investment in a partnership. You keep the cows healthy, you build up your homestead, and maybe someday when I finally get my own place started, you can help me out in return." "What kind of partnership?" Violet followed him inside, her mind spinning. Nathan set down the flower and turned to face her. "The honest kind." "Violet, I have been gambling and drifting for 9 years now, and I am tired of it. I want to settle down, build something permanent. But I cannot do it alone, and I do not have the temperament to work for someone else. You have land and you have drive, but you need help and you need capital. It seems to me we could both benefit from working together. Are you proposing marriage?" Violet's voice came out sharper than she intended. "Because I should tell you, I am not interested in marrying someone just because I need financial help." "No, I am not proposing marriage," Nathan said, though his ears turned slightly red. "Not yet, anyway. I barely know you and you barely know me. What I am proposing is that I help you get this homestead running properly, and in return, I get a place to come back to between games, a chance to build up some livestock, and maybe the opportunity to get to know you better. If something develops between us, well, that would be fine. If it does not, we part as friends and split whatever we have built together." "Fair deal." Violet studied him, trying to see past his words to his real intentions. He met her gaze steadily, and she saw nothing but sincerity there. It was a risk, she knew. Letting a man into her life, depending on him, could end in disaster. But she was already facing disaster on her own, and at least this way she had a chance. "Fair deal," she said, extending her hand. "Partners." His hand was warm and calloused when it closed around hers, his grip firm but not crushing. They shook on it, and Violet felt like she had just stepped off a cliff without knowing what waited below. Over the next few months, Nathan became a regular presence at the homestead. He would ride in every 2 or 3 weeks, stay for a few days, work from dawn to dusk repairing things and improving the property, and then ride out to his next game. He fixed the barn roof, reinforced the paddock fence, helped Violet harvest what was left of the crops, and even started clearing new fields for spring planting. He brought supplies each time he visited, and he never asked for anything in return except her company in the evenings. Those evenings were Violet's favorite part of his visits. They would sit on the porch after supper, watching the stars come out, and talk about everything and nothing. Nathan told her stories about his years on the cattle drives, about the places he had seen and the people he had met. Violet told him about growing up in the Cherokee Nation, about her father's determination to make a success of his homestead, about her mother's death from fever when Violet was 12. "That is when everything started falling apart," Violet said one evening in October, wrapped in a shawl against the cooling air. "Papa never got over losing Mama. He tried, he worked hard, but his heart was not in it anymore. And Tommy, he just got angrier and angrier. He blamed Papa for Mama's death, said we should have taken her to a real doctor in Fort Smith instead of relying on the local medicine woman." "Would it have made a difference?" Nathan asked quietly. "Probably not. The fever was too far gone by the time we realized how sick she was. But Tommy needed someone to blame, and Papa was the easiest target." Violet pulled the shawl tighter. "I tried to hold us together, but I was just a child myself. By the time I was old enough to really help, the damage was done." Nathan was quiet for a moment, then said, "My mother died giving birth to a baby that did not survive either. I was only 5, but I remember my father's face when he came out of the bedroom. He looked like someone had carved out his insides and left him hollow. He tried for a few years, but eventually he just gave up and found someone new to fill the empty space. Never mind that she did not want his existing children around to remind him of what he had lost." "I am sorry," Violet said softly. "That must have been terrible." "It taught me to rely on myself," Nathan said. Not sure if that is a good lesson or a bad one, but it is what I learned. As autumn deepened into early winter, Violet found herself looking forward to Nathan's visits with an intensity that both thrilled and frightened her. She caught herself thinking about him when he was gone, wondering where he was, if he was safe, if he was winning or losing. She started taking more care with her appearance on the days she expected him, braiding her hair more neatly, wearing her better dress, even though it was foolish vanity when there was so much work to be done. She was not sure when friendship had started turning into something deeper, but by the time the first snow fell in December, she could no longer deny it. She was falling in love with Nathan Brooks, the wandering gambler who had given her back her cow and stayed to help her rebuild her life. The question was whether he felt the same way. Nathan arrived on a cold Tuesday morning, riding through light snow flurries, his horse's breath steaming in the frigid air. He had been gone for nearly a month this time, longer than usual, and Violet had started to worry that something had happened to him. When she saw him coming up the road, relief flooded through her so strongly that she had to grip the porch railing to stay upright. "I was starting to think you had forgotten about me," she said, trying to keep her tone light. Nathan dismounted stiffly, and she saw that he was favoring his left side. "Never. I got held up in Fort Smith. There was a situation." "What kind of situation?" Violet came down off the porch, her concern sharpening. "Nathan, are you hurt?" "Just a disagreement with a sore loser," Nathan said, but his face was pale under his tan. "I am fine, really. Just need to rest for a few days." He was not fine. Violet could see that clearly once she got him inside and convinced him to remove his coat. His shirt was stained with blood on the left side, and when she lifted it, she found a knife wound that had been crudely bandaged but was showing signs of infection. "This needs proper cleaning," Violet said, her voice sharp with worry. "Sit down and do not argue with me." She heated water, found clean cloth, and carefully cleaned the wound while Nathan sat rigid in the chair, his jaw clenched. The knife had sliced along his ribs, missing anything vital but leaving a nasty gash that was red and inflamed around the edges. "What happened?" Violet asked as she worked, her hands as gentle as she could make them. "There was a man who accused me of cheating," Nathan said through gritted teeth. "I was not, but he would not listen to reason. He came at me after the game and I defended myself. I got his knife away from him, but not before he managed to cut me. You should have seen a doctor." "I did. In Fort Smith. He cleaned it and stitched it and told me to rest. I rested for a week, then I came here." Nathan looked up at her, and there was something vulnerable in his eyes that she had never seen before. "I wanted to come here. I needed to see you." Violet's hand stilled on the bandage she was wrapping. "Why?" "Because in a month away, I could not stop thinking about you," Nathan said quietly. "Because every town I passed through felt empty and pointless. Because I realized that I have been drifting my whole life, and for the first time, I have found a place I want to stay." "Nathan." Violet's voice caught. He reached up and took her hand, his fingers warm despite the cold day. "I know what I said about not proposing marriage, about taking things slow. But that was before I spent a month missing you so badly I thought I might go crazy. Violet, I am falling in love with you." "I think I started falling in love with you the moment I saw you standing on that porch, proud and defiant even though your world was falling apart. And I need to know if there is any chance you might feel the same way." Violet looked down at their joined hands at this man who had appeared in her life like an answer to a prayer she had not known she was making. He was not perfect. He was a gambler, a drifter, someone with a hard past and an uncertain future. But he was also kind and honest, and had worked harder for her benefit than her own brother ever had. He had given her hope when she had none, had treated her with respect when he could have taken advantage, had slowly and carefully earned her trust. "I do feel the same way," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I love you, Nathan. I think I have loved you for a while now, but I was afraid to admit it." Nathan stood up, wincing slightly at the movement, and cupped her face in his hands. "Can I kiss you?" "Yes," Violet breathed. His lips were gentle on hers, careful and questioning, and she answered by wrapping her arms around his neck and pulling him closer. The kiss deepened, becoming something warm and hungry and full of promise. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Nathan rested his forehead against hers. "Marry me," he said. "Not because you need help or I need a place to stay, but because I love you and I want to build a life with you. A real life, not just a partnership." "Yes," Violet said, laughing through sudden tears. "Yes, I will marry you." They were married 3 weeks later in Tahlequah, in the small church that served the mixed community of settlers and Cherokee families. It was a simple ceremony, with only a handful of witnesses, but Violet wore her mother's best dress that she had carefully altered to fit, and Nathan bought a new suit for the occasion. The preacher pronounced them man and wife, and when Nathan kissed her, Violet felt like her heart might burst from happiness. They spent their wedding night in the cabin that was now truly theirs together, and Violet learned that Nathan was as careful and considerate a lover as he was a partner in all other things. He took his time, asked what she liked, made sure she found pleasure before seeking his own. Afterwards, they lay tangled together in her narrow bed, and she felt safe in a way she had not felt since before her father died. "We need a bigger bed," Nathan murmured against her hair. "We need a lot of things," Violet said, smiling in the darkness, "but we will get them together." The winter was hard, but they faced it as a team. Nathan took fewer gambling trips, staying closer to home and only traveling when they needed supplies or extra money. He taught Violet how to play cards, and she discovered she had a good head for numbers and probability. They played for buttons and dried beans in the evenings, and she won more often than not, which made him laugh and call her a natural. In February, Nathan announced that he had won enough money to buy a breeding bull and several more cows. He wanted to build up their herd properly, to turn their small homestead into a working ranch. Violet agreed, and they spent weeks planning how to expand their operation, where to build additional barns and paddocks, how to manage the work that would come with more animals. "We will need help eventually," Nathan said one evening, studying the rough sketches they had made. "More cattle means more work than 2 people can handle alone." "We could hire someone," Violet suggested. "There are always young men looking for ranch work." "Or we could have children," Nathan said, glancing at her. "I know it is early to be talking about this, but I want you to know that I would like to have a family someday. If you want that too." Violet felt warmth spread through her chest. "I want that. I want children with you, Nathan. I want to fill this house with noise and laughter and life." He pulled her into his arms and kissed her deeply. "Then let us see what we can do about making that happen." Spring came late that year, but when it finally arrived, it brought renewal and hope. Nathan bought his bull and 5 more cows, and suddenly their small operation felt like a real ranch. They worked from dawn to dusk, building fences and shelters, breaking new ground for crops, tending to the growing herd. It was exhausting work, but it was also deeply satisfying. In May, Violet realized she had missed her monthly courses and began to suspect she might be pregnant. She waited another month to be sure, then told Nathan one evening after supper. He lifted her off her feet and spun her around, whooping with joy, and then immediately set her down and fussed over her, worried that he had been too rough. "I am pregnant, not made of glass," Violet said, laughing. "But I appreciate the concern." "We are going to have a baby," Nathan said, his voice full of wonder. "Violet, we are going to be parents. Are you ready for that?" she asked, suddenly serious. "I've never been more ready for anything in my life," Nathan said, taking her hands. "I want to give our children everything I never had. A stable home, two parents who love them, a place where they belong. We can do that, Violet. Together we can do that." She believed him. Over the past months, she had seen Nathan transform from a rootless gambler into a dedicated rancher and husband. He had proven himself over and over, not with grand gestures but with steady, daily commitment to their life together. If he said they could give their children a good life, then she trusted that they would. The pregnancy was not easy. Violet suffered from terrible morning sickness that lasted well into her second trimester, and the summer heat made her swell and ache. But Nathan was endlessly patient, taking on more of the heavy work, bringing her cool water and making sure she rested. He read to her in the evenings from a book of poetry he had won in a card game, and he talked to her belly, telling their unborn child about the ranch they were building and the life that waited. In November, their son was born after a long and difficult labor. They named him James, after Violet's father, and when Nathan held him for the first time, Violet saw tears streaming down his face. "He is perfect," Nathan whispered. "Violet, he is absolutely perfect." James was indeed perfect, a healthy baby with his father's dark hair and his mother's blue eyes. He was also demanding, colicky, and loud, and Violet quickly learned that new motherhood was harder than anything she had ever done. But she would not trade it for anything. Watching Nathan with their son, seeing the gentleness and wonder in his face as he changed diapers and walked the floor with a crying baby, filled her with a love so deep, it sometimes brought her to tears. As James grew from infant to toddler, the ranch continued to expand. They bought more land from a neighboring family who was moving to Texas, adding another 40 acres to their holdings. Nathan hired 2 ranch hands, young Cherokee men named Samuel and Joseph, who were hard workers and quick learners. The cattle herd grew to over 30 head, and they added chickens, pigs, and even a pair of horses for breeding. By the time James was 3 years old, Violet was pregnant again. This time, the pregnancy was easier, and she gave birth to a daughter they named Rose in the spring of 1888. Rose was a calm, cheerful baby, the complete opposite of her fussy brother, and she brought a new kind of joy to their household. "We are truly blessed," Nathan said one evening, holding Rose while James played at their feet. "5 years ago, I was drifting from town to town with nothing to show for my life. Now I have a wife I adore, 2 beautiful children, and a ranch that is finally starting to turn a real profit. How did I get so lucky?" "It was not luck," Violet said, settling beside him on the porch. "It was choices. You chose to bring back that cow instead of keeping her. You chose to help me when you did not have to. You chose to stay and build something instead of drifting away. Every good thing we have, you earned through your choices." "We earned," Nathan corrected. "I could not have done any of this without you, Violet. You are the foundation of everything." They had their struggles, of course. There were years when the cattle prices dropped and money was tight. There were droughts that killed crops and forced them to buy feed they could barely afford. James broke his arm falling from a tree when he was 6, and Rose nearly died from scarlet fever when she was 4. But they weathered every crisis together, drawing strength from each other and from the life they had built. When James was 10 and Rose was 7, Violet found herself pregnant again, a surprise that left her both delighted and anxious. She was 31 now, older than she had been with her other pregnancies, and she worried about complications. But this pregnancy went smoothly, and she gave birth to twin boys, Matthew and Thomas, in the fall of 1895. 4 children, Nathan said, looking slightly dazed as he held one infant while Violet nursed the other. "We have 4 children." "Having second thoughts," Violet teased. "Never. Though I think we might be done after this," he smiled at her. "Unless you want to try for half a dozen." "4 is plenty," Violet said firmly. "Our hands are full enough as it is." The ranch continued to grow and prosper. By the turn of the century, they had over 100 head of cattle, a dozen horses, and had become one of the more successful operations in the area. They had built a larger house to accommodate their growing family, with real glass windows and a proper wood floor. They had hired additional help, and Nathan had stopped gambling entirely, finding more satisfaction in honest ranching than he ever had in cards. James grew into a serious, hard-working young man who loved the ranch and showed every sign of wanting to take it over someday. Rose was bright and curious, always reading and asking questions, and Violet privately hoped she would go to college and make something of herself beyond the ranch. The twins were still young and wild, but they showed promise of becoming fine men in time. On their 15th wedding anniversary, Nathan took Violet into Tahlequah for a rare night away from the children, leaving them in the care of the ranch hands and Rose, who at 14 was responsible enough to handle her younger brothers for a night. They had dinner at the hotel, and afterwards Nathan presented her with a gift, a delicate gold locket. "Open it," he said. Inside were 2 tiny photographs, one of James and Rose and one of the twins. Violet felt tears spring to her eyes. "It is beautiful," she whispered. "Not as beautiful as you," Nathan said. "Violet, you are the best thing that ever happened to me. I meant that when I said it 15 years ago, and I mean it even more now. You gave me everything I never knew I needed. A home, a purpose, a family. I love you more today than I did the day we married, and I will love you more tomorrow than I do today." "You gave me everything too," Violet said, reaching across the table to take his hand. "That day you rode up with those cows, I was at the end of my rope. I had nothing and no one. You gave me hope, Nathan. You gave me a future. And you gave me a love that has sustained me through everything life has thrown at us." They went back to their hotel room and made love with the slow, intimate knowledge of 2 people who had shared 15 years of joys and sorrows, triumphs and struggles. Afterward, lying in Nathan's arms, Violet thought about that desperate girl standing on the porch, watching her brother walk away and her only cow disappear down the road. She had felt so alone then, so hopeless. She could never have imagined that her salvation would appear in the form of a wandering gambler with green-brown eyes and a good heart. "What are you thinking about?" Nathan murmured. "How far we have come," Violet said. "How grateful I am for every moment that led us here. Even the hard moments, especially the hard moments, they taught us how strong we could be." The years continued to pass, bringing new challenges and new blessings. Oklahoma became a state in 1907, and their ranch thrived in the changing landscape. James married a Cherokee woman named Sarah and took over day-to-day management of the ranch, allowing Nathan and Violet to step back slightly and enjoy their grandchildren as they arrived. Rose went to college in St. Louis and became a teacher, though she returned to Oklahoma every summer. The twins grew into fine young men, Matthew becoming a veterinarian and Thomas studying law through it all. Violet and Nathan remained the center of their growing family, the foundation upon which everything else was built. They grew older together, their hair going gray, their bodies showing the wear of hard years and harder work, but their love never diminished. If anything, it grew deeper and richer with time. On a warm evening in the spring of 1920, Violet and Nathan sat on the porch of their ranch house, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and gold. They were both in their 60s now, grandparents many times over, and the ranch had grown beyond anything they had dreamed of that first year. They had over 300 head of cattle, dozens of horses, and hundreds of acres of productive land. More importantly, they had built a family dynasty that would continue long after they were gone. "You ever think about that day I rode up with your cow?" Nathan asked, taking Violet's hand. "Sometimes," Violet said, smiling. "I think about how young we were, how uncertain everything was. I think about how brave you were to take a chance on me." "I was not brave, I was selfish." Nathan raised her hand to his lips and kissed it. "I saw something I wanted and I went after it. Best decision I ever made." "What did you want? The ranch?" "No, you. I wanted you from the moment I saw you standing on that porch, all fierce determination and stubborn pride. The ranch, the family, all of this, it is wonderful. But it was always you, Violet. You were the prize I was really after." Violet felt tears prick her eyes even after all these years. "You won me, Nathan Brooks. You won me fair and square, and you never gave me reason to regret it." He pulled her close, and they sat together in comfortable silence, watching the stars come out one by one. Somewhere inside the house, they could hear the laughter of their grandchildren who had come for Sunday dinner and stayed late. Somewhere out in the fields, the cattle were settling down for the night. And here on the porch, Violet and Nathan held each other, two people who had started with nothing and built everything. "I love you," Nathan said softly. "I will always love you." "And I will always love you," Violet replied. "Thank you for bringing back my cow. Thank you for staying. Thank you for choosing me." "Thank you for letting me," Nathan said. "Thank you for seeing past the gambler to the man I could become." They sat together until the moon rose high and bright, until the night grew cold enough to drive them inside, until the grandchildren had all been tucked into bed and the house grew quiet. Then they went to their bedroom, the same room they had shared for nearly 40 years, and held each other close. Violet thought about the girl she had been, standing on that porch and watching her brother gamble away her last hope. She thought about the man who had appeared like a miracle, riding up with 3 cows and a heart big enough to change her world. She thought about all the years between then and now, all the struggles and triumphs, all the love they had built together. Her brother had gambled away her only cow for nothing, but a cowboy had won it back and added 2 more. And in doing so, he had given her everything: a partner, a lover, a friend, a family, a future. He had given her a life beyond anything she could have imagined, filled with love and purpose and joy, and she had given him the same in return. Together, they had built something lasting, something real, something that would endure long after they were gone. Their children would carry on the ranch. Their grandchildren would tell their children about the gambler and the desperate girl who became the foundation of a family empire. But for now, in this moment, there were just the 2 of them, Violet and Nathan, 2 people who had found each other against all odds and refused to let go. 2 people who had chosen love over fear, hope over despair, together over alone. And that, Violet thought as she drifted off to sleep in her husband's arms, was worth more than all the cattle in Oklahoma. That was the real prize, the real gift, the real miracle. Not the ranch or the money or the success, but the man beside her and the love they shared. Her brother had lost everything in a card game, but Violet had won everything that truly mattered. And she would spend the rest of her days grateful for the cowboy who had ridden into her life and decided to stay. The end came peacefully for both of them. Many years later, Nathan passed first, in his sleep one winter night, with Violet holding his hand. She followed him 6 months later, unable or unwilling to live without her partner of nearly 50 years. They were buried side by side on a hill overlooking the ranch they had built together, under a cottonwood tree that Nathan had planted the year James was born. Their children gathered at the funeral, along with their grandchildren and great-grandchildren, a family that numbered in the dozens now. They told stories about Violet and Nathan, about the early days of the ranch, about the love that had sustained them through everything. They talked about the gambler who had given back a cow and stayed to build an empire. They talked about the woman who had been brave enough to trust him, and they promised, all of them together, that they would carry on the legacy, that they would maintain the ranch and keep the family together, that they would remember where they came from and honor the two people who had started it all. On the headstone, beneath their names and dates, James had inscribed a simple message. Together they built everything from nothing but love. It was the truth, pure and simple, and it was the best epitaph either of them could have asked for. The ranch continued to thrive for generations, a testament to what two people could accomplish when they chose to work together, to trust each other, to build something lasting out of hope and determination. And always the story was told and retold of the day a brother gambled away his sister's only cow, and a cowboy won it back and added two more, and in doing so changed two lives forever. It was a love story, pure and simple. A Wild West romance that had started with a foolish gamble and ended with a legacy that would last forever. And it proved, beyond any doubt, that sometimes the best things in life come from the most unexpected places, from the kindness of strangers who become lovers, from the simple act of doing the right thing even when it costs you something. Violet and Nathan had found each other in the hardest of times, in a place where hope was scarce and futures were uncertain, but they had held on to each other and refused to let go. They had built a life together, brick by brick, cow by cow, day by day. And in the end, they had created something beautiful and lasting and true. Their love had been the foundation of everything. It had sustained them through droughts and diseases, through hard winters and lean years, through the pain of loss and the joy of new life. It had been tested and proven again and again, and it had never failed them. And now, lying side by side under that cottonwood tree, they rested together for eternity, their work done, their legacy secure, their love immortalized in the family they had created and the ranch they had built. Two souls who had found each other in the wilderness and refused to part, even in death. It was a fitting end to a beautiful story. A happily ever after that had been earned through hard work, sacrifice, and unwavering devotion. The kind of love story that people would tell for generations, remembering the gambler and the girl, the three cows that changed everything, and the Wild West romance that had started with a simple act of kindness and grown into something extraordinary. And somewhere, in whatever place spirits go when they leave this world, Violet and Nathan were together still, holding hands and watching over the family they had created, the ranch they had built, and the legacy of love they had left behind. Their story was complete, their ending happy, their love eternal. It had all started with a cow, a card game, and a cowboy with a good heart. And it had ended with everything two people could want. A life well lived, a family well loved, and a partnership that had lasted through everything the world could throw at it. The Wild West had been a hard place, an unforgiving place, a place where dreams often died and hope was hard to come by. But for Violet and Nathan, it had been the setting for the greatest love story of their time. A story of redemption and second chances, of kindness repaid and trust rewarded, of two lonely people finding each other and building a life together that neither could have achieved alone. And in the end, that was what mattered most. Not the ranch or the cattle or the money or the success, but the love they had shared, the family they had raised, the life they had built together. That was the real treasure, the real legacy, the real happily ever after. Her brother had gambled away her only cow for nothing, but the cowboy had won it back and added 2 more, and in doing so he had given Violet Zimmerman everything she had ever wanted or needed: a partner, a lover, a friend, a future, a home, a family, a love that would last forever. And that, in the end, was worth more than all the cows in the world.